All right. In this video, I want to get into a few things here. I want to get into the Great Tribulation, mainly about the length thereof. Is it 7 years long? Is it 3.5 years long? And what I stumbled across while actually looking into this. I wanted to explain to my wife about the 7-year tribulation and to show why people think that it's 3.5 years and why I get why they would see that. And while looking into it, I stumbled across something that had to do with Daniel 12 and the 1290 days and the 1335 days. And it's some interesting stuff that actually shares with you the actual date of the rapture. And there's some things here that add to it that have to do with the tribulation time period. And I'm going to try to put it all together here in a simple manner. Hopefully, you can all grasp it. But I just, maybe you should pray a little bit because I don't know how well I'm going to put this together and how clear I'm going to say everything here. But what I'm going to share with you is that while going through Daniel and Revelation, I do not see a 7-year period of tribulation at the end. I keep seeing 3.5 years. Now, we do see sevens a lot in the Bible. It's a symbol of completion, right? And we see that with God creating everything in Genesis in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested. So he completed the whole cycle with 7. And then for the time frame for humanity, we get 6,000 years, and then Jesus returns, and we have a millennial reign of Jesus here on earth, completing 7,000 years, so another set of 7. And we'll see those kind of things throughout the Bible, sevens, right? And we'll even see with Joseph interpreting the dream of the Pharaoh to show 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of famine. And people take that to be like, yeah, this is a depiction of the end of the world where we're going to have a plenty, mainly of the Word of God. And then there's going to be the 7-year tribulation where there's a famine to be hearing the Word of God. And it's like, okay, yeah, I can't argue with you that there's definitely a lot of things pointing to 7 years. But then when I actually get into Daniel and Revelation, which really focuses in on that end times and on that last period of time before Jesus shows up, that it never talks about 7 years. It always talks about 3.5 years. But there is one part which talks about a 7-year period. But I'm going to get into that to show that that's not what's actually being shown. It's actually showing 3.5 years. And it has to do here with what I got up right at the moment is this Daniel 70 weeks. And I know a lot of you probably heard about Daniel 70 weeks. You've read about it. You listen to Bible prophecy teachers. And this is a big deal because it points to when the Messiah is going to show up and shows Jesus the exact time he's going to show up. And that's why at the time of Jesus, people were looking for the Messiah because they knew it was at the end of the period of time Daniel spoke about. So anyway, Daniel's 70 weeks is actually 490 years. And if you're not sure how that works, it's because there's 7 days in a week, and then 7 times 7 is 49, but there's 70, so it's 490, and each day is a year. So it's 490 years, right? And score, where it says 3 score, you'll see this a lot in the scriptures, a score, 3 score, and such things like that. A score is 20, so 3 score is 60. So just clearing that up before we get into this. But anyway, I'm going to read this section and dissect it a little bit. And by the end of the video, I'm going to talk about the date of when the rapture is actually going to happen. But you're going to have to sit through all this if you want that. And I don't want to say the actual date as in I know the month, the week, the day, and the hour. But the year and the season, it is shown. It is shown to us. And I'm going to bring that up here. So, What I'm going to do here, let's break this down. We're told about 70 weeks are determined upon thy people and upon the holy city. So we have to grasp here that Gabriel is an angel from heaven, and he's talking to Daniel, a Jew, an Israelite. So the 70 weeks are determined upon Israel, the Jews, and upon the holy city, Jerusalem, to finish transgression and to make an end of sins and to make reconciliation for iniquity and to bring in everlasting righteousness and to seal up the vision and the prophecy and to anoint the most holy. So here is the context of this whole paragraph here that's going on, this whole section. This is the topic. It has to do with the Messiah. He's going to show up, make an end of sins and make reconciliation for iniquity, bring in everlasting righteousness, and seal up the vision, anoint the most holy. All right, so that's the subject here, is the Messiah. And he goes, okay, you want to know when this is going to happen? That's what this has to do with, the 70 weeks. He says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem on the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks. So we see here, and 62 weeks. But I just wanted to focus on this real quick. At this time, Jerusalem and the temple have been destroyed. So what Daniel's being told is when the city and the temple is going to be rebuilt, the time is going to start when the commandment goes forth to do so, to rebuild Jerusalem. So there's going to be a commandment coming from a king to rebuild and restore Jerusalem, and that will take 7 weeks or 49 years to rebuild Jerusalem. And on to the Messiah is the 62 weeks after that. So after that 49 years, there's going to be 62 weeks, which is about 434 years. So a total of, 483 years here. And so there's 1 week missing, right? It goes on here. And it says, and after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince shall come, shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. Now here is something interesting, because it says, after 62 weeks shall the Messiah shall be cut off. Now a lot of people seem to think that means that right after the 62 weeks, that's when Jesus is cut off. Right? So that's why they get this 7-year tribulation. You see, they think right after 62 weeks, Jesus is crucified, and that last week is not finished. So that last week has to be finished at the end of time. Right? Yet if I told you, I'm going to give you $50 after noon, or after, let's say, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, that doesn't mean I have to give it to you at 1:01 in the afternoon for that to be a fulfilled promise. I could do that at 2:30, 6:30. I could do it 10, 11 o'clock at night. But I still gave it to you after 1 o'clock this afternoon, right? So just because it says after doesn't mean right after, as it also says the prince shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. That's not right after 62 weeks. It's actually somewhere about 40 years after, right? So when it says the Messiah shall be cut off after 62 weeks, doesn't mean it's right after, because then you would have to say, oh yeah, then right after the prince is going to come to destroy the city. It didn't happen like din. No. It says after this time, then these things will happen. It doesn't mean right after, as we get from the context of this whole thing. Because a lot of people say Jesus was crucified around 30 AD, right? I'm not saying that's the date. I'm saying it's in that area. Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. So this prince that comes that just destroys the city and the sanctuary didn't happen until 40 years later, right? So you are not to take this to be a bang, 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 bang event As soon as the 62 weeks are up, boom, this happens, this happens, this happens. That's not how it goes. It's telling you after this period, okay, now start watching for it because it's about to happen. Right? And this gives you a little bit more detail of when the Messiah is going to get cut off. Right? This next passage says something else that people seem to twist up. It says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. And like I said, it's Gabriel, an angel from heaven, talking to Daniel, a Jew of Israel. And he says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Notice how it says the covenant? It doesn't say a covenant. It's the covenant. It's a definite article. And Daniel don't know what this means because we are told in the Old Testament about the Messiah coming to establish the new covenant. Right? So it's talking about the Messiah who's going to be cut off after 62 weeks. He's going to confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, which is exactly what happened. Jesus is baptized and he starts his ministry. And guess what? In the midst of a week, and each day is a year, he is crucified because he only did his ministry for 3.5 years. Like it says here, in the midst of a week, he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease. And for the overspreading of abominations, he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolate. So we see here in the midst of the week, he causes sacrifices and oblations to cease. Right? That's what Jesus did when he's crucified on the cross. He put an end to all that. Yes, they continued doing the sacrifices, but they no longer had any value or any meaning now because they were all pointing to Jesus as the Messiah. And now that the Messiah has shown up and actually did what he came to do, you don't need those sacrifices anymore. What you need is faith in what the Messiah actually did. Right? So this definitely seems to be talking about the Messiah. After the 62 weeks, he is anointed. He starts his ministry where he's confirming the new covenant with Israel for a week. And in the midst of the week, he causes sacrifices and oblations to cease for the overspreading of the abominations and yada, yada, yada here. Right? And another thing that's interesting is if you come back to this right here, if you take the starting point of the 62 weeks, you get something interesting. Something very interesting here is that if you remove the 49 weeks and you start with the 62 weeks, because it doesn't say after 69 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off. So it's kind of interesting that you could possibly apply this before the 7 weeks that this is going to start, right? And why do I do that? Well, because it says, after 62 weeks shall the Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince shall come and destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the end shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolations are determined. So this seems to coincide with what's going on here in the next sentence that's brought up. The Messiah is cut off. He's confirming the covenant. He's cut off. And then the abominations and everything that causes desolate is the prince that comes afterwards. So if we take this to be before the 7 weeks, it's interesting. Because what you'll end up finding out is that in 70 AD, Rome destroys Jerusalem and the temple. Right? And that is, like I brought up, is some 40 years after Jesus is crucified. Very interesting, right? How so? Well, if you actually minus 49 years from when that happened, you would actually come to about 21 AD. And that would be when the Messiah was actually anointed. 21 AD. And then 3.5 years later, so he would have been baptized around fall time. around the Feast of Trumpets, Atonement, and Tabernacles. And then 3.5 years later would be in spring during the time of Passover when he's crucified. Right? And that would be around 24 AD. Now keep that 24 AD in remembrance, because I know a lot of people like to bring up that after Jesus is crucified, it's going to be 2,000 years, and then he's going to return. And that would be 2024, right? Just keep that in mind. Just keep that in mind for later. All right? So, with that being shown here, when we go to Daniel chapter 12, we read a couple of interesting things here. One thing to keep in mind is it says, at that time, Michael's going to stand up, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people. And there shall be trouble such as there never was since a nation, even unto the same time. Right? So we see here the time of trouble is when Michael stands up, right? So we're going to jump real quick to somewhere. What do I have on the side here? This one's close to it, so let's go here. And it's interesting because in Revelation chapter 12, it talks about a woman giving birth to Jesus. So this is Israel here. And it says, and there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought against his angels. So here Michael's standing up, right? And he's fighting against a dragon who wants to destroy the child and Israel. And at this time, the woman flees into the wilderness for 260 days. Now, if you take that to be 30 days in a month, that's 42 months or 3.5 years. And when this happens, so a rapture of the church here, the serpent is cast down, and he has a short time, like it says here. It says, therefore, ye heavens, and ye that dwell in them, rejoice. Sorry, I left that out. Woe unto the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea, for the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time. And how short is that time? It's not 7 years. It says here, the woman is fleeing into the wilderness for a time, times, and a half a time. A time is a year, times is a multiple, so it's 2 years, and a half a time is a half a year. 3.5 years. So that's what we keep seeing, 3.5 years. We never see a 7-year period in Revelation. The only time we've seen it is when we're in Daniel. Right? But when we come back over here to Daniel chapter 12, and we come down to verse 6 here. Daniel asks this angel, how long shall it be to the end of these wonders? And he tells him it shall be for a time, and a half a time. So we see here it's a 3.5 year period at the end, because in the midst of Jesus confirming the covenant for 7 years, he's cut off and he never finishes confirming the covenant. Right? So there's a 3.5 period left. And that's what Daniel's told is at the end. He's not told that there's 7 years. There's a week left. No, he says there's a time, times, and a half a time, which we've just read in Revelation chapter 12, talking about the same context here of when Michael stands up for the people of Israel. Right? And he tells them to seal up the book because it's for the time of the end. Right? Now here is an interesting thing here. This is what we're going to come back to. Not right yet, but from Daniel 12 verses 11 and 12. This is something we're going to come back to. But before we do, I'm going to get into breaking down Revelation a bit here. So let's go to Revelation and go to chapter 6. This is after we're told about the churches in Revelation chapter 2 and 3. And then in Revelation chapter 4, we read about the church getting raptured. And through chapters 4 and 5, we read about what the church is doing in heaven. And then we read about the seals being opened. Right? So that's what I'm going to get into. Just quick overview. I'm not going to read all this. If you want to go through it, feel free. I'm just going to have it here just to have it up. So keep track of where I'm going here. We've got the first seal with the white horse, and the rider is crowned, and he's given a bow, and he conquers. This is Antichrist. He's trying to look like Jesus, coming on a white horse. He's crowned, except he doesn't have a sword coming out of his mouth. He has a bow, right? So we can see after the church is gone, we have an Antichrist show up. Second seal, a red horse, and pieces taken from the world, and a great sword. So it's kind of like he's using his word to get people to hate one another and to fight one another and kill one another. The third seal is a black horse. So we see economic issues and issues with pricing on food and oil. And then we have a fourth seal. In each one of the first four seals, a beast comes up to tell John these things, which is interesting. I'm not sure what that means, because every other time there's an angel speaking or somebody in white linen speaking, but these first four, there's one of the four beasts that are before the throne of God tell him these things. And this fourth seal is a pale horse, and death and hell follow. So it was interesting, because I was like, he's given power by his word, and it seems to be government, and through starvation and death. So I'm thinking of old age, of weakness, disease. I was wondering if those killed by this horse go to hell, because it says death and hell following him. So is he only allowed to kill those who don't have the seal of God? Then we have the fifth seal, where those who died for Jesus are comforted, and they seem to have gone through the first four seals, and they've probably died during that period. So we can see during those first four seals that Christians and Jews are being martyred. Then the sixth seal, great earthquake, sun blackened, moon is blood, the stars fall from heaven, and the heavens are rolled up, and people are fearful, for the wrath of God is soon to come. So we see here that the wrath of God is soon to come after the sixth seal. So before that is not the wrath of God, right? So we have a break before we get to the seventh seal, and we read about in chapter 7. Let's do this to keep along. The 144,000, which are Jews, male virgins, and it says that they're not defiled with women, and women represent churches, especially in the book of Revelation. So it could mean that they're not defiled with the churches, because we read about in Revelation 17 about the harlot, and you can't be a harlot unless you are a Christian or Jewish church, because a pagan church like Islam or Buddhism, Hinduism, or something like that, they cannot be a harlot because they're not married to God. They're not joined to God. So they're not committing harlotry at all. But if a Christian church or Israel were to mingle with the world and mingle with the other religions, they would be committing whoredom. So we read about in Revelation chapter 17 about this great whore and her daughters. So these 144,000 could be the people who are not defiled by these churches. Well, there's a lot of Christians and Jews who are part of these churches who are still saved, but they're still, for some reason, attached to their church. It's something that's plaguing them, I guess. But we see also a great number of Gentiles right here after these 144,000 Jews who are sealed, and they're saved as well. But we can see that there's a differentiation between the Jews and the Gentiles. That's because the church is gone. In the church, there is no Jew or Gentile. Outside of the church, there's only Jew or Gentile. It's one or the other. So we can see this is outside of the church. So the age of grace is done. They're showing again the rapture. And then once we get to chapter 8, we get the seventh seal. There's a half hour of silence in heaven, and 7 trumpets are given out. So it seems like, okay, these next 7 trumpets are something that happens after the seals are opened. So it's a different events about to happen, right? That's what it seems like. It doesn't seem like this is a retelling of the first 7 seals as trumpets, but it could be, because you got to think about how the Hebrews saw things. They don't see things linearly like we do, like we see the beginning, middle, end. How they see it is a circle, kind of like day-night cycle. You got the day, the sun comes up, it comes down, and you got the moon comes up, and you got that repeating over and over. So you got the day cycle repeating, and then you got the weekly cycle repeating, the monthly cycle repeating, the yearly cycle repeating. So when they tell their stories and such, they keep telling it over and over. Kind of like if you've ever seen a movie where it shows you from the point of view of, let's say, the good guy, or the bad guy, doesn't matter, or some bystander. It shows you their point of view for about 20 minutes, and then it will go back to where it started and tell you that same story from another person's perspective. So it's repeating the story, but from a different point of view. So that's the idea we have to keep in our minds, is that, okay, once we get to the 7 seals and we come to the 7 trumpets, is it retelling the 7 seals? Or is this a continuation of what's going on after the 7 seals? Right? But also at the 7th seal, there's fire that comes down from the altar of God and causing thunderstorms and earthquakes. These are things to take in note as we go through here, because there seems to be connection through the 7 seals, trumpets, and vials. Right? To make you see that it seems to be a 3.5-year period and not a 7-year period. So we get the start of the trumpets here in chapter 8. We get the first trumpet, we get hail and fire mingled with blood, destroys a third part of all trees, and all green things, all green grass is burnt up. And what's interesting is that there's a passage that talks about these, I think it's the locusts that are, well, yeah, in trumpet 5, the locusts are able to come and not touch any green thing, not any green tree or the grass, but only those who do not have the seal of God. So what it seems to be is that the trees and the grass represent people. The trees might represent leaders, and the grass are those that are under them and follow them and get shade from them. All right? So these that are burnt up, it's probably talking about a third part of mankind, the leaders and the people that follow him are burnt up. And then in the second trumpet, a great mountain with fire is cast down into the sea, and a third of the life in the sea died, and a third of the earth's ships are destroyed. And it seems to be kind of related to what goes on in Revelation 18 with the ships outside of Babylon, but we're just seeing if there's any connection. And I hope you bear with me. I know some of this part that I'm getting into right now is tedious, but once it's all given out, it's a crazy picture at the end here. But anyway, the third angel's trumpet, a great star called wormwood, falls to the earth and turns a third of the water to wormwood. This kills many men. The fourth trumpet, a third of the sun and moon and stars are darkened, so that the day only shines for a third of the time that it normally does. Then the fifth angel's trumpet, a star or an angel falls from heaven with the key of the bottomless pit, letting out a smoke that darkens the air, blocking out the sun, and strange locust-like creatures come up, but they're not, like I said, they're not allowed to touch the green trees or any green plant, but only those not sealed by God, right? So it seems like the trees and everything are to represent people of some kind. And it says this is Abaddon, or Apollyon, the destroyer, the perdition. Could be the son of perdition, who's the king over them, which was Judas, who a lot of people depict as the Antichrist. Then we have the sixth trumpet, but the fifth and the sixth are actually mentioned here in Revelation chapter 9. Sorry for not changing it over. But the sixth angel, there are 4 angels loosed from the Euphrates River, and they have a 200 million man army that kills 1/3 of men with fire and brimstone that come from their mouths, and their powers in their mouths and tails that are like serpents. And I was thinking about this because it talks a lot about power given to the word of the sword, and it has to do with the words. What's coming out of their mouth has some kind of power. And like tails, you do think of like a monkey tail or a dog tail, but it could be also a reference to telling you a lie, a tale to deceive you, like a story, because they're being serpents, deceptive, like the serpent in the Garden of Eden. And I'm going through all this to show that this seems to be one 3.5 year period. I know this, like I said, this part is a bit tedious, but I hope you're bearing with me here. Then we get to chapter 10. There's a gigantic angel. Seems to be gigantic anyway. Maybe that's just how I'm seeing it. Talks to John about a book, and it seems to be connected to Daniel chapter 12 and a few other things in Daniel that are sealed up. They're mentioned in Daniel chapter 12, and he's to eat up the book, and he's to prophesy. So it seems like things are being unsealed to John, just as there's 7 thunders that come from this angel. But John is told not to write what the angel actually said. So it's like things that were revealed to Daniel are being revealed to John, but at the same time they're told to him not to be revealed, which makes me think, well, if things that were not revealed to Daniel, John is sharing, maybe somebody else is going to come along in the future to share what these are. And I have no idea what those 7 thunders are. I have not been given any vision or anything, so I'm not making that claim, just in case somebody wants to try to say that I am. But then, John eats up this book. And this is where I got sidetracked and I went into Daniel chapter 12, and that's where I started getting into the 1290 days and the 1335 days, which is a day for a year. And I came up with something interesting there that I'm going to share at the end of this, which is something you're going to want to pay attention to. So anyway, in chapter 11 here, we're told about the 2 witnesses, right? After John, he measures the temple and the altar and those worshiping the inside. But outside is the courtyard, so the world, or among Israel, the nation of Israel in Jerusalem, the Gentiles are going to be trampling underfoot there for 42 months, which is 3.5 years. The first time 3.5 years is mentioned. And then it talks about the 2 witnesses, which seem to be tied to Moses and Elijah because of what they're able to do with plagues and fire. But they're also going to be prophesying for 1260 days, which is 42 months with 30 days in a month, which is again 3.5 years. So it's talking about the same period here. and their time ends with the beast that comes out of the bottomless pit. And I don't know if the beast comes out of the bottomless pit right at the end of this 3.5 year period, or he's already been up, and by the end of the 3.5 year period, he finally kills him, right? But either way, I think it's given us a time frame that this is 3.5 years, as you'll see as we continue here, because then we get the seventh trumpet, and it seems to be the end. So we get this 3.5 year period, and then we get the seventh trumpet, where it talks about the kingdoms of the world are now the kingdoms of the Lord, and the dead are judged, and people are rewarded or punished. And there's a great earthquake and thunder and hail. So this is something to pay attention to, because at the seventh trumpet, there's an earthquake and hail, and I think we got the same thing at the seventh seal. Let me go back on my notes here just to make sure here. Yeah, the seventh seal, there's fire that comes down from the altar of heaven, causing thunderstorms and an earthquake. So we can see that it could be a retelling of the seven seals, a little more detail of what's going on. So when we look at these, we can maybe get a better grasp of what's going on. So when we look at the first trumpet, we can see hail and fire mingled with blood destroy a third part of all the trees and green grass that are burnt up, right? Well, we can see here at the first seal, the white horse with the Antichrist upon it is going around conquering. So we can see that that first trumpet might be the Antichrist going about, and he's killing mainly God's people. Because we read in the fifth trumpet that the green grass and the trees are not allowed to be touched, but those who are not sealed by God. So it seems like the Antichrist, he's going out and he's making war against God's people, and he's killing them. And that's why at the fifth seal, we read about those who were martyred are comforted, and at the fifth trumpet, those martyrs are not getting martyred at the moment. It's those who don't have the seal of God who are getting punished or getting tormented. So we can see a lot of connections like that. But I won't get too much into it. You can do a lot of that on your own, but it is definitely very interesting stuff. So when we get to from 6 through to about chapter 7 seem to be of one event. It's kind of interesting because we get chapters 2 and 3 about the church, chapters 4 and 5 about the church raptured and they're in heaven. Then we got chapters 6 and 7, which seem to be about the seals. And then we get chapters 8 and 9, and it actually seems to go all the way to 11. So that kind of breaks that pattern of 2, 2, and 2. But it did seem to go for a little while. But anyway, that was the end of that thought. That one went nowhere. But we're finally past 11, and we can see that this seems to repeat again, but in detail in Daniel chapter 12. Because we see not Daniel chapter 12, Revelation chapter 12. We read in Revelation chapter 4, the church getting raptured, and we get that same depiction here. So we're getting the story retold again. There are 12 stars, they give birth to Jesus. The dragon wants to destroy Jesus, but Jesus is taken up. That's the rapture. So the dragon wants to make war with the woman because the church is gone, so he's going to go after Israel, right? And he's no longer in heaven, he's cast down. So that's why we're going to have strange things going on the earth at this point where, UFOs showing up and they're going to say that they're aliens. There might be strange creatures on the earth. There might be a lot of weird things going on because these fallen angels are now on the earth. And so we get that retelling. And the interesting thing is, is that it's the same 3.5 year period that we're told about the Gentiles trampling the court, the two witnesses, for 3.5 years, and we're told, again, 1,203 days, so 3.5 years, the woman flees into the wilderness. The short time that the devil has after he's cast out of heaven. The woman is nourished for a time, times, and a half a time. Here at verse 14. That's a time is a year, times is 2 years, half a time is half a year, 3.5 years. So we keep seeing 3.5 years. We never see the 7. And they never seem to be, oh, this 3.5 years happens, and then there's this point where the next 3.5 years start. No, it's the same 3.5 years as the woman flees into the wilderness after the rapture. The dragon goes after her. So she goes into the wilderness. And then here it says how. She's taken in by the wings of an eagle to go into the wilderness, where she's nourished for this time to hide from the face of the serpent, which is that dragon. Right? So, with that being said, we could jump over to 13, which could also add a little bit more of what's going on during this 3.5 year period, because this dragon is cast to the earth, and as it's cast to the earth, we see the beast come up out of the sea. And how long is he able to go? Well, it tells us for 42 months. Where is that? Where it tells us that? The power is given him over all the tongues, and worship him not written in the book of life. Oh, up here. And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power is given to him to continue for 40 and 2 months. So we see here he's cast out of heaven. He's given 42 months, which is 3.5 years. The second beast comes and he's supporting the beast that came out of the sea. This beast came out of the earth, supporting the first beast. It actually issues out the mark of the beast, and all those who won't take the 666 mark can't buy or sell, and ultimately are put to death. So we can see this is the detail of what's going on through the time that the woman is in the wilderness. Israel's in the wilderness, and this is the beast that's coming about, and it's what's going on for the 3.5 years that the two witnesses are witnessing, and it's the same beast that ends up killing these two witnesses. And this is what's going on to give a description of those seals that are going on. The Antichrist that comes and he's giving a crown to conquer in the first seal. And he uses hailfire mingled with blood, destroys a third part of all the trees and the green grass. We see that here as this first beast coming up out of the sea. It's retelling us this story over and over, and it's always a 3.5 year period. It's never 7. And I'm sharing all this to give the detail and connect it all without going too overboard with detail and reading everything here, because I know I couldn't keep your attention that long, and I'm shocked if I got your attention this long. You know, that's the grace of God right there, working a miracle. But anyway, we see that is what's going on here, a retelling. And it seems as though this is at the end of the 3.5 years, as it talks about the 144,000 are in heaven. And it seems as though they were raptured at the same time the two witnesses are, because they raised from the dead after 3.5 days, and they are taken up. Right? And then what happens after this? It says there's an angel, and he's giving the everlasting gospel. This is not the same gospel of grace. The gospel of grace is not everlasting. It came about when Jesus died on the cross, and you have a period now that's almost up. It's been going on for 2,000 years, that if you accept Jesus by faith, that you're saved. It's not about your works. It's not about things that you think about, things you say, about what you do, any merit of your own. because then it's no more grace. Grace is unmerited favor, nothing that you earned or worked for or deserve at all. You just get it because God loves you and you accept that love. And that's what you can do right now. You can accept what Jesus done for you, because we deserve to go through what's coming, and we deserve to go to hell because we're not perfect and we're sinful. The way that you see people who are murderers and pedophiles and rapists and how they should be cut off from society and even put to death, well, that's how heaven sees you, because you're selfish, manipulative, you're a liar, you looking at everybody sexually. You're doing a lot of these things that you don't fit into heaven, and they see you just as bad as you see a rapist, a murderer, and a pedophile. That you need to be cut off from society, right? And that's how you need to realize how you are. You don't deserve heaven. None of us do. But if we grab onto what Jesus did, where he takes our life onto himself, and he kills it on the cross, and he sends it to hell, that he then gives us his life, which is perfect and righteous, which deserves heaven. And he gives us that life. If we accept that now, we're saved and we can be raptured. And we don't have to go through any of this, which I hope you do if you haven't done that already. But at this point, all of a sudden, there's something different going on, right? We have the everlasting gospel, right? And the everlasting gospel is about faith and works, right? You need to actually not only have the faith of Jesus Christ, but you also need to have your testimony. You need to be witnessing, and you need to be keeping the law. You need to be, doing works, and you need to be helping those unfortunate, right? You can't just be dismissive. Right now, you can get away with being a shitty Christian because you're saved by faith, but at this point, you cannot. It'll cost you your salvation. It's a different dispensation, a different set of rules. But anyway, we see that they're raptured up, and it seems to be the end, because Jesus talks about at the end, it's a harvest, and the angels are the harvesters. And what's going on here? We see that the wheat is taken up, but then there's grapes that are also going to face the wrath of God because they're going to be trampled on. So it's an example of two different fruit. One is something you're taking and you're actually going to keep, and the other one you're destroying to make something else out of it, right? So they have to go through the wrath of God. And what's interesting is it talks about the blood goes up to the horses' bridles, and this seems to be Jesus' return, which we read later on. Something I'm not going to get into because it has to do with the end. It's no longer about this 3.5-year period. And what I was actually doing in the study was studying the 3.5-year period, which is not 7 years. And it's just interesting, if you want to continue on your own, that when Jesus returns, he's the one treading this out. And there's so much blood of all the people that he's killing off to defend Israel that it comes up, all the way past the horse's legs. See, that's a lot of blood. But that's crazy. Anyway, it just changes the way you see Jesus, right? Very patient guy, very loving. But if you're going to reject that love, that's just stupid, and you deserve what's coming to you, especially if you're going to fight against the ones that he loves and cares about. But anyway, then we go to chapter 15. So this seems to be the end, right? So we're told the story all over again. Like I said here, the woman, there's a rapture, and then Satan wants to go after her, and he forms a government. He's given a crown. The Antichrist is showing up. The mark of the beast is going on. He's giving 42 months, so it's a 3.5-year period. Then we have a rapture. Seems to be at the end of this 3.5-year period, just like the two witnesses are taken up after 3.5 years. And then we come to chapter 15, and we read about the 7 last plagues being given to 7 angels, and there's the people who got the victory through the tribulation praising God. Right? So it seems like all those who've gotten the victory have been taken up. Because this is a harvest period, and you don't harvest everybody in one day. You can get the first fruits, and then you come back and wait for the rest to be ready, and you might have to come a couple times, right? And even when you come to something like sugarcane, you actually have to burn the field. You burn the field, and then you can harvest. So what's like the description it gives here of the grapes? You have to trample them to get the juice out of them. If you want to make grape juice or wine. But anyway, we can see the temple of God. It's opened up. These angels come out. No one can go into the temple until their job is finished. And this seems to be the actual end. The tribulation, 3.5 years, seems to be done by this point. But at the same time, this can be a retelling of the 7 seals and the 7 trumpets. But I'm not too sure on that. It might be these just plagues poured out at the end on the world, because the world is just full of the lost now. So we got the first vial. Swords are given to those who took the mark of the beast. I don't know if this happens as soon as the Antichrist shows up and he starts killing people, because that's what we get the picture of. After the first seal, the Antichrist shows up, first trumpet, there's people dying, right? And by the time we get to the 5th seal, there's martyrs already, right? So it seems as though the mark of the beast could be going really fast. I mean, things have to happen quick if it's 3.5 years. But anyway, it's something that's, I think, going to happen a lot faster than a lot of people think. So we got the second vial. The sea became blood, and every living soul in the sea died. And this is interesting because it connects to what we see with, I think it's the second trumpet. A great mountain burning with fires cast into the sea, and 1/3 of the life in the sea died. So we can see there's a similarity and there's a connection, but it's almost as if the seals and the trumpets are connected, and they're kind of a warning of the plagues that are actually going to come. They are not the actual final last bit of wrath. They are just to warn you, right? And the last things that happen are these vials. These are actually things that they point to. God gave them 2 chances, 2 witnesses to say, hey, what's coming are these last bit of wrath that are coming out of these vials. And what's going to happen is the life in the sea is going to die. And if that doesn't get you to repent, well, guess what? All the life in the sea is going to die. It's going to become blood. And then the 3rd angel with the vial, the fresh waters turn to blood, because that's what they get to drink, right? And the 3rd trumpet has to do with a star falling from heaven, and it hits the fresh water, and it turns the water bitter, so that 1/3 of mankind dies from that, right? And with the 3rd seal, we see economic issues having to do with price changes, and if you're not able to get water, that could have an effect on that, right? So there could be connections to all these things. And the 4th vial, the sun scorches men with fire. And I was thinking to myself, it's like they're vampires. They're given blood to drink, and now they can't go out in the sun, or it's going to scorch them with fire. It doesn't say it's going to scorch them. It says scorch them with fire. So it's as if it's going to light them on fire like you would see in a vampire movie, right? And that 4th vial would be 4th seal. We have a pale horse. It has death and hell that comes with it. And hell is with fire, right? So you see a bit of a connection there. And then at 4th trumpet, it's the sun, moon, and stars are darkened, so that the day only shines for a 1/3 part of it. So God still seems to be merciful. If this is all happening at the same time that the sun scorches people, it's only for a 1/3 part of the day, so they get plenty of darkness to hide, like vampires. And then the 5th seal, the 5th vial, darkness is upon the seat of the beast in his kingdom, and I was thinking like the darkness in Egypt that could actually be felt. And that could have connection, again, with the seal and the trumpet. Because at that time, the 5th seal, those who are uh, martyrs are comforted. And in Egypt, when that plague of darkness came upon them, they had light in the houses of the Israelites. And then at the fifth trumpet, the smoke blocks out the sun, so there's darkness, right? But the only ones that they could harm are those without the seal of God. So you can see a connection where it seems like it could be a retelling. Every time you read the seals, the trumpet, the vials, can be a retelling of the same story, right? Especially when we come down to a couple of these other ones. The sixth vial seems to be very much connected because it says the Euphrates is dried up and makes way for the kings of the east, right? And what do we see at the sixth trumpet is four angels are loose from the river Euphrates, and they have a 200 million man army. So that one is very much connected. Now with the sixth seal, I don't know, because it says that there's a great earthquake, the sun blackened and the moon is blood, the stars fall from heaven. I don't know, because the stars falling from heaven could have to do with uh, the Euphrates drying up, the angels being loosed from the Euphrates, and the 200 million man army, the kings of the east. But before we get to the actual seventh vial, there's a brief mention here that while this is going on, two interesting things are said. It says there's three unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. So it's like their words in a sense. Kind of like Jesus says that his words are spirit and they are life. And we have unclean spirits coming out of their mouth. So it has a lot to do with their words. And it says that their words are like devils doing miracles to fool the world, the kings of the world, to fight against God, to gather them into Armageddon, right? And that might have to do with how he gets the 200 million man army to gather up and to fight against Israel. And so it might be, a depiction of how that happens and how he's able to do that. But you can see that it comes out of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. The beast is considered to be the Antichrist. The false prophet is, to me, seems to have something to do with Islam. The dragon, on the other hand, might have to do with something more demonic, like some fallen angel claiming to be an alien and deceiving the world. Kind of like you would see in a Transformers movie. You got the Autobots come down and they're trying to say that they're the good guys, and the Decepticons are the bad robots coming to get them. And the humans need to help the Autobots fight off the Decepticons that are coming to get them. But in reality, the Autobots are the Decepticons, and they are fooling mankind to join them to fight against God who's coming to actually destroy those Decepticons. So it's a trick. They flip the script, right? But anyway, we got the seventh vial. But before the seventh vial, it's interesting. It says, "Behold," this is Jesus saying, "Behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked, and they see his shame." So he seems as though, even though all these things are going on, he's like, if you can still keep your righteousness, you still may be saved here. Because I might kill off all these people before they kill you. But only if, you keep your righteousness, you keep your garments on. So that gives some people hope through all this. But then we get the seventh vial, or as it says here, seventh bowl. Don't know why. But it's poured into the air, and there's a voice from the throne, and there's thunders and lightning and a great earthquake and hail. Right? And it's interesting, very interesting, because when we look at what do we got back here at the seventh seal, there's silence in heaven for about a half hour, right? And then trumpets are given out, and there's fire that comes down from the altar, and there's thunderstorms and an earthquake. And then at the seventh trumpet, we have what seems to be the end. The kingdoms of the world become now the kingdom of the Lord. The dead are judged and rewarded punishment is given out. And there's an earthquake, thunder, lightning, hail. Right? It seems to be the same event going on with the seventh vial. And at this time, there's an earthquake and there's judgment going to be given to now Babylon, the harlot, which is interesting because right at the end of chapters 12 and 13, which describe the beast and how he comes about, we get the 144,000 are up in heaven in chapter 14, and there's the everlasting gospel given, and we're told that Babylon is fallen. So it seems to be, again, telling us about the end. The same 3.5 year period, it's telling us about it over and over. Right? And then we come to here, Revelation chapter 17, and it's the judgment, and we're told that the judgment happens at the end. This is the end. Judgments come, and now people are going to get rewarded or punished. Right? So we see here now the whore is judged. And that's what happens at the end, is the judgment. And this whore sits upon the beast that came up out of the sea. And like I brought up, in order to be a harlot, you have to be connected to God. So you got to be Christian or Jewish, and you have to be cheating on him to be a harlot. Right? So this perfectly describes, if you want to go through it, I'm not going to get into detail, but the purple and scarlet decked with gold and the cup of her fornications and stuff, this depicts the Roman Catholic Church. It's the biggest Christian church, and it is a harlot, and all the Protestants that come out of her are her daughters that are also harlots, as it describes. She's the mother of the harlots, and she drunk off the blood of the saints, which she has done throughout the last millennia plus. And yeah, you can study this one out yourself. It's the Rome, that great city, and even the Catholic Church says that they are Babylon, that Peter, when addressing his letter to Babylon, is referring to Rome because he couldn't say Rome at the time because of persecution. They didn't want to mention Rome to bring upon themselves any kind of backlash. That's why in Revelation it doesn't say Rome, it says Babylon, so that Rome wouldn't just burn up the writings and kill the people that had it. It was talking about Babylon, so they were like, oh yeah, whatever, it's not talking about us, it's talking about Babylon. But it was a key phrase, and the Catholic Church admits that, so they admit that they are Babylon. And we're told to come out of her in Revelation chapter 18. This seems to be the ending part here, is the judgment. All comes upon her in 1 hour and 1 day, just completely annihilated. And people are all grieving about this. And it seems like this could happen at the very end, but I'm not sure. Not too sure. But this is where I stopped, because these next chapters, though they're very interesting, are not going to get into that 3.5 year period. It's getting into Jesus returning, setting up the millennial kingdom, and all those great things we have to look forward to. But what I would like to do now is actually tell you about when the rapture is going to happen. You're thinking, yeah, right. Well, hear me out. With all that being said and done, when we come back here to Daniel in chapter 11, and it says here, and from the time that the daily sacrifice shall be taken away, and the abomination that maketh desolate set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Blessed is he that waiteth, and cometh to the 1,330 days. Right? And he tells him this is going to be for the end of days. Right? Go thy way till the end be. So this is interesting, because if you take the time here, the first 1,290 days, and you actually add that as years to the time that the sacrifices were taken away by Nebuchadnezzar, when Daniel was actually taken captive into Babylon to serve Babylon as a eunuch. If you actually do that, that happened around 601 BC. The exact time, hard to tell, but around that time, 601 BC. And if you add this to it, you come to 689 AD. Right? 689 AD. And you may be saying, what's the big deal about 689 AD? Well, that's when the abomination of desolation was set up. It was set up in 689, and that was the dome of the mosque put upon the Temple Mount. That's the abomination. So from the time the sacrifices were taken away till that desolation happened was 1,290 days. You know what else is interesting? You add the 1,305 and 30 days to 689 AD. Guess what you get to? 2024. And remember, I told you to remember that date that Jesus would have been crucified at 24 AD. 2,000 years later is 2024. So you can see how those times actually match up. Right? They actually match up, and the thing that's different about what a lot of Christians are saying is they think that the 2,000 years has to end at the end of the tribulation. Like the tribulation doesn't happen at the time of the millennial reign. It happens before the millennial reign. And the only thing I have to say is that, hey, there's a great darkness before the dawn, right? That this could be considered the start of the day, is the tribulation, right? It's kind of like when Mary Magdalene and the ladies with her went to the tomb to see Jesus on Sunday morning. It says it was before dawn, but it says it was the start of the first day of the week, right? And so it started at dawn, but the sun wasn't up yet. So not too sure, that all fits together, but, just putting some things together here. And you also got to keep in mind that it's a time that's cut off. So it could be the end of the 6,000 years, but it's really the 5,996 and a half years, because there was 3.5 years cut off, according to God, to put at the end. So we still got the end of days, the 2,000 years, for 1,000 years for a day, like Peter says. And then you have the last 3.5 years to fulfill the 70th week of Daniel. And there you go, right? But, I thought of this because of a lot of people getting excited about the rapture, and they think that the end of the tribulation would be at 2028, 2029. And I was like, okay, but that doesn't mean it's a 7-year tribulation. It seems to be 3.5 years. So let's say it's 2029, then the rapture would be like halfway through 2025, which would be around the fall, because you go halfway from the Jewish time, the lunar calendar, and their year starts in the spring, like March, April time. So halfway through would be around the fall, September, October. And yeah, so that would be the way you look at it. And if it's the year 28, well, then 3.5 years before that would be halfway through 2024 and the fall of that time, which would be the Feast of Trumpets, Feast of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles time, which a lot of people think we would be raptured around the time of the Feast of Trumpets. So, all of that being said, it all seems to come together quite well. But that is that. Thank you for sitting through this. I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching. Take care.